Good afternoon, everyone. I am sorry I am late. This Zoom thing made me install like an updated version, and then I had problems because I have problems, and it added to those problems. It's not going to be like one thing that takes me out of this career. It's going to be death by a thousand cuts, and updated versions of software will certainly be on the list of, it'll be in the ME's report as likely contributing factor to professional demise. But it's nice to see everybody. And I'm on the current version of Zoom for those who are interested in that. Why don't we start with the September minutes and see if we can once again start with a winning topic of approving minutes. Has anyone read the minutes, and is there a motion to approve?
I've read them, Judge, and I move to approve the minutes.
Excellent. Chief Krantz, is that a second?
Yes, I read them too.
Look at this. Already we have this interagency collaboration. Any objection to approving the September minutes? All right, September minutes are approved. And do we have any members of the public participating today? I don't see any, but if there's any members of the public, you want to share your thoughts, now would be the time. And this will take us rather quickly to item number 4, fiscal year 23 to 25 supervision for individuals with drug and property offenses. And let's see, Trevor Stevens, always reliable. Mr. Stevens, are you ready to proceed?
I am, Judge. Thank you.
Outstanding.
And Dee Dee will be helping with this presentation as well, so she's actually going to start.
Can everybody see our PowerPoint? Awesome, thanks. So Angie and DA Gunnels, I can see you most clearly from my little tiny screen, so can't see other folks. So just raise your hand or step off the mute, and then we'll go from there. We are coming to you today with a request to review and approve what we call in our government jargon Measure 57 plan. And really what that is services and supervision for individuals with substance use disorder and property offenses. Let's see, and I'm going to just start to sort of give you the broad overview. You know, this plan is for parole and probation to work with specified individuals. And in a way, we work with them in the same way that we work as all other types of folks with different offenses. But in some way, you know, it's specific to them. So very, very briefly, you may have seen this before. I'm going to run through it. You know, overall, with this population, as well as with our general population, we're looking at kind of a concept of each decision each day. What's the impact on public safety if we act or react? What is the accountability that is needed for this individual? External accountability, because they can't hold it together themselves right now. Or are we teaching internal accountability in a moment what's better for them? And then how can the ground be laid for long-term change? So in terms of all that, supervision, services, and sanctions is what we do. It's very discrete activities. Supervision includes assessment and activity based on their risk, their needs, and what they need and how they need to learn in order to get on a better track. That's called responsivity in our, again, jargony world. We teach accountability through effective professional relationships, consistency, and behavioral techniques. We do those office visits, field and home visits, the same thing that we're doing with folks who are with substance use disorder, same as others. And then in terms of services, and this maybe comes into play a little bit more with that substance use disorder population, the need for services that we either broker or that we subsidize or that we motivate to engage in include things like housing, cognitive behavioral therapy. Treatment is a huge one, obviously, getting an assessment, engaging in treatment, staying in treatment. Polygraphs, not a huge thing for this population, but it can be. Employment, huge. You can obviously imagine these are folks who have had long histories of broken employment. That ends up being something that is very difficult to engage them with. But luckily, we have a lot of employers in this region who want to give folks a second and a third and a fourth chance. So we often do that, and you'll see that routinely with the substance use disorder population, and other kinds of barrier reduction services. Sanctions, again, pretty common amongst all kinds of offense types. But if we kind of set our mind to what is it that happens with clients who have substance use disorders, external accountability is often needed when a person is in their relapse cycle. Which, you know, we can accept over and over and over again, that is an expected part of the recovery process. External accountability can be more reporting. It can be strategic urinalysis, you know, come in more frequently for UAs or go onto a random UA program, even if you're doing that with your treatment provider. So we're kind of getting, you know, double, triple monitoring going on. It can include things like community service, electronic monitoring. If our person is struggling with alcohol abuse, we have alcohol bracelet monitors that we can use. And then finally, of course, we can utilize jail, and sometimes have to when that substance use ends up impacting negatively with other community members and causing harm. That's kind of the outlay of things that we do. And this particular plan, Measure 57, that Trevor's going to go into a little detail, kind of will provide you with a sense of kind of the extra work that parole and probation does with people who have substance use disorders and property offenses.
Thanks, Stevie. So just some background on Measure 57 and just kind of where it came from. So it actually came out of ballot Measure 57 back in 2008. And really the focus there was actually to increase sentences for repeat property and drug offenders. But with that, there came some legislation that there has to be a mechanism to get those individuals into treatment. So the legislator created a separate part that provided funding for community correction organizations to really meet this statutory requirement. So community corrections organizations were tasked with providing services, which include treatment and other services to connect those individuals back to treatment. And Stevie, if you can do the next bullet, please. Yeah, and what it did is it really kind of created a statewide approach to this statutory requirements. The majority of the counties in Oregon receive this Measure 57 funding, and just the major goal there is providing the additional funding for the resources in terms of treatment, housing, and focusing the time that they're on supervision to really get that individual back to getting that individual into treatment so they can focus on that behavior change. It includes like that balanced approach that Dee was mentioning, but looking at treatment, supervision, and immediate sanctions just depending on how those need to be used. But the background generally is that it was created out of that Measure 57 back in 2008, and there's specific funding set aside in legislation to provide for this population.
Thanks, Trevor. I had the opportunity to speak with the Joint Committee on Addictions and Community Safety Response yesterday in Salem. And our task was to sort of share with them. So I'll just very quickly share with you, what is it that community corrections brings to the table when it comes to supervising and supporting people who have substance use disorder. And the thing that we focused on there, and I just want to focus on it here too, just to kind of bring it closer to your minds, is the unique thing that community corrections offers is this interesting and wonderful relationship between positive, healthy, trustworthy relationships with clients and accountability. So when we say relationship, and this is something that, you know, we are uniquely tasked with in the public safety system, to engage in long-term relationships with individuals who have substance use disorders. And to us, the most effective kind of relationship is trustworthy. It's compassionate. We understand what the difficulty is presented to individuals who have addiction. It's therapeutic, meaning it's oriented towards behavior change, and it's person-centered. It's not just about laws and rules and consequences, but it's about you as the full human. Now, our POs are extremely good at this. This is why we get into this business, but it's not enough to be and have a relationship like this. To work, this relationship has to be full of accountability. And that can mean we will hold folks accountable, external when necessary, as I mentioned. We can try to leverage external accountability through their crisis or their cycle, and then get them back returned to normal status as soon as possible. And then, depending on where folks are at in their particular recovery cycle, we will teach internal accountability, right? Through contingency management, through skill building. And contingency management literally means if this, then that. If you do this good thing can happen. If you do this bad thing may happen. Very, very elementary there. And there's a lot more science behind it, but that's essentially how we can try to leverage these two poles, relationship and accountability, which again, we provide to every person on supervision, regardless of their offense, but really come in handy when we're talking about people with substance use disorders. And then Trevor will, and you'll probably have seen this, all the components that you see in that Measure 57 plan, if you had a chance to read that document, include all of these components that you see here. Everybody gets an assessment. That's a criminogenic, a crime driving risk and need assessment. All people get a case plan. It's built on, not just here are your list of conditions, go to it, and we'll see you if you don't do it, but much more proactive, and try to work with the person on what they want out of the world and out of life. That is also pro-social, that we want for them out of life as well. Motivation is huge. I think the number one skill used in any substance use clinical setting is motivational interviewing, which is typified by the expression, meet you where you're at. And our POs also do this work. It's not something we just expect treatment providers to do, but we are constantly engaging in motivation, depending on where that person is at in terms of their behavior change process. We do skill building, as mentioned earlier. Usually this is related to trying to get the client to understand and think about the relationship between how they think, how they feel, and how they act. That's a basic CBT, or cognitive behavioral treatment approach. Again, that's something that they see mirrored in their treatment agencies and their treatment settings, but it's something that the POs are constantly reinforcing themselves with the client. And then finally, stabilizing, which of course, when we know that relapse is part of recovery, the need for stabilization is constantly occurring. And again, with these two poles, relationship and accountability, I'm just really proud of the work that our POs can do and are uniquely set to do to help people stabilize in this compassionate but also restrictive environment. All right, Trevor.
And so what we did is we looked at some of the Measure 57 outcomes, and just as a caveat, this information comes out of a data warehouse system that's quite a bit older system, and so it works in snapshots, which, as we know, is not the most effective way for these types of systems to work, but it at least kind of provides just some outcomes in terms of what the Measure 57 population is kind of looking like. So these first two bullets, employment and treatment, these are literally snapshots at a point in time. So when that snapshot was taken, 65% of individuals on the Measure 57 caseload were employed, and then 23% of the individuals on that Measure 57 caseload were in treatment. The 23% seems quite low, but what this doesn't measure is those individuals that have been referred to treatment or those individuals that have completed treatment. So if you add those in terms of just our Measure 57 population, you get much higher rates, closer to that 50-60% range. The actual statewide average from the same snapshot is around 28% for individuals in treatment. So it just kind of explains why that snapshot isn't the best measure for that, but it does provide a measurement that we can compare statewide. In terms of community service positive case closures, those are closure numbers that are pulled from a 6-month period. So it's looking at a closure for a 6-month window. And of those closures, how many of those individuals completed their community service on the Measure 57 caseload, which for us was 100%. And then of those, how many of those were positive case closures that were prison or post-prison supervision or probation? And that's 71% and 67%, which those are higher than the statewide averages, which are about 65% and 51%. So, and then what it does is it looks at recidivism for the 3-year period for the group that's from the 3-year period directly before this group. So it's a really confusing measure, but what they'll do is they'll grab 6 months of individuals, look at them for 3 years and look at their recidivism rates. And for that Measure 57 population that fit into this, we had a 0% recidivism rate for those with on probation and 25% for those on post-prison. So comparative to statewide averages, those are lower as well. So we're definitely seeing some positive outcomes with these Measure 57 measures, but just the caveat being that the way they're pulled with those snapshots just makes it interesting in terms of how to analyze that data. And DV for the next slide. So as DV mentioned, there was a copy of the entire program application provided in your packets. This table just represents the budget related to this. It's a 2-year cycle. And what it does is it pays for funding for 1.5 parole and probation officers over that 2-year period. This is generally about 45 to 60 individuals. And the main focus there is really treatment, housing, and other subsidy funding, which we're connecting these individuals to through their PO while balancing that accountability and balanced supervision model. So at this time, we'll open it up to questions if there's any questions about the application itself or what we presented, and then we can kind of go from there.
No questions? All right.
Your Honor,
Sure.
real quick, sorry, Trevor, this
Yeah.
is Shane. Quick question, your 0.5 FTE, is that really an existing FTE you already have in parole and probation?
Yeah, all of that is existing FT, and so the 0.5 is just the other half of that FT is paid for out of a different grant funding source.
Thank you.
Yeah, none of the requests in this application is for new FT. It's all established FT.
Any other questions for Trevor or for DV? And so Trevor, you need a motion from this group to approve the Measure 57 application, is that correct?
Yes, Judge.
Very
Your
well.
Honor, this is Shane. I'll make that motion.
Excellent. Thank you, Sheriff. And is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Donna. Any objection to recommending approval of the plan? Very well, motion carries. Tanner, DV, anything else on item 4?
That's everything I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation.
Judge,
Yes,
if I just may offer, Health Services Director Janice Garceau was not able to be with us today, and she just shared with me and with all of us that she would approve applying for the M57 funds as well. So just so that that's on the record for
I
the.
appreciate that. I failed to mention that. Thank you for bringing that up, that she had been diligent enough to go over the materials and send in her thoughts. So really an example to all. So, all right. Moving on to item 5, treatment court white paper request. And this is connected to attachment 3. And I believe DV and Angie Curtis are gonna lead off.
Yes, thank you. Angie, I'll just kick us off and then, chime in where you feel necessary. In one extent, I'm hoping that folks have had a chance to look through this 2-pager. It is nothing new. I think that this group has seen all of this information at one point or another in the last 6 to 9 months as the decision about the adult treatment court in our county has been evolving. So I will just very quickly go through it in the event that you have not been able to read it. And all it is meant to do is just serve as a kind of a level set for all of us so that we can all kind of come at this conversation that I believe some of our members may wish to have following our conversation, but so that we're all kind of working from a similar set of knowledge. So essentially, it's a document that just kind of describes a little bit of the background of our particular court, but mostly considerations for the effective deployment of what is called a model drug treatment court program. So the background, that we had for 17 years, some version of a best practice model court. For most of that time, I think it was a family drug court model. Over the last couple of years, that transitioned from family drug court to adult treatment court, I believe because of the lack of referrals for qualifying eligible clients, i.e. folks who had young children. There just weren't enough of those given different dynamics going on. So that switched over to all adults, not necessarily those who are parents. You'll see the requisite components of an adult treatment court are listed on that page 1 of that document. You can see some of the elements of that. Again, I don't think those are brand new categories for anybody here, but just kind of having them out there to show you that it certainly is a very comprehensive, person-heavy, work-heavy process that does require a significant amount of collaboration and coordination between multiple different disciplines and agencies. Now, the family drug court model, which is what we had provided a little bit of outcome statistics on, supported success for many participants. It's called, these data were related to the time when it was a family drug court model, not the regular adult, or what the last version was, which is adult treatment court, which is why I'm pointing that out. Significant amount of success, particularly for those who completed, and then maybe, as you could imagine, those who were unable to complete the program had, a lot more recidivism than those who were able to complete the program. So certainly showing some success in that area. The challenges to sustaining that number of comprehensive components required are next outlined, starting at the bottom of page 1. And there's a link there to what those best practices are, by the way, at the bottom, to kind of give you even more comprehensive there. The key here being that to be a model court and to get funded in this state, you really need to be a model court. To do that requires something called fidelity, which means you need to do the thing the way that it was designed and clinically proven to have been effective. If you're doing it different, you're not doing it to fidelity, and your outcomes really can probably not be as predictable as your other outcomes show. So the fidelity piece is really, really important. And of course, it's a huge amount to do with why all of us as partners kind of came together to make the decision that we had to ultimately. So for some of those reasons on page 2 are really kind of describe what the concerns were. And those bullet points were really inability to recruit or retain a qualified provider or any provider, inability to hire a treatment coordinator who was qualified and eligible, or any treatment coordinator, unfortunately, decreasing referrals of eligible participants for various reasons that I don't know if we all know what those reasons are, but objectively speaking, there was a pretty big decline in program referrals. Historic partners in the program and those that are required for that fidelity model no longer able to participate due to their own staff vacancies or capacity issues. A very resource intensive model when implemented with fidelity. And then lack of local residential treatment and insufficient clean, sober, affordable housing made it difficult to implement other parts of that program model. And that kind of led us to where we're at today. Angie, I will just turn it over to you to see if you felt like I missed something in that document that was particularly important to surface.
Thank you, Devi. I think you addressed all the high spots. And I think what this document also highlights is that it was a variety of factors that contributed to us needing to make the difficult decision to discontinue the program. I think we can all agree that the need for intensive treatment services for people in our community continues to exist. But there were a number of factors that made it difficult to continue doing the program in the way that it needed to be done, because those program participants make a huge commitment of their own time to follow through with all the services they're required to enroll with in order to get those outcomes. And if those participants were going to make that kind of a commitment, we felt like we needed to be sure that we could deliver on the other end of that program with the services, access to the services they needed to ensure those outcomes if they're going to work that hard. And so again, just kind of points out that there were a variety of factors that were making it difficult to have this program be sustainable and in the best interest of enrolling new participants in the program.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think at this time, Judge, we just wanted to present that information, offer obviously opportunity for conversation or questions right now, and then let you kind of take it from there.
All right, thank you. And Councilman Broadman was kind enough to share some information with the group about plans moving forward in terms of well, Councilman Broadman, if you'd be kind enough to speak to it since you're here.
And Judge, I apologize. That was something we were talking about before you jumped on. We were talking, so I sent that around so that people would have the proposal in front of them if it came up in future meetings.
Got it.
On this adult treatment court, this was a conversation that we had at City Council when we had the DA and Chief Krantz there and Judge Bagley. There is at least a desire at that body, and I've heard it in the community, to at least identify if, the community does want to have another resurrect the adult treatment court or something like it. What do we need to do? What are the next steps? And I had anticipated there was going to be more work that was going to be shifted to me, for instance. So I really appreciate Devi and Angie putting this together. It's a great synthesis of what of what we had when we made the tough decision to accept that recommendation some months ago. But I think from my perspective, this is an additional starting point to have the conversation about what we can do to resurrect the treatment court or something like it, and whether that's the desire of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. And I know Commissioner Chang said that he was having some trouble with video. Commissioner Chang, perhaps you'd be kind enough to share with Lipsick your thoughts on what's been so far put together by DV and Angie. And I wanted to say I was incredibly impressed with the quality of work. I think it really captured a number of the factors that led to the demise of adult treatment court, and put that together in very short notice. So thank you for that excellent work.
Yes, thank you for giving me a chance to speak, Judge Ashby. I really appreciate this work being done. These are all of the things that various people have said to me were challenges that led to the suspension of the adult drug treatment court. And I mean, it does raise a lot of questions for me about kind of first order challenges and second order challenges. I'm looking at this pretty long list of challenges, and I'm wondering which of these are fundamental and which of these are might be secondary. What are the things that really did us in versus more of the 1,000 cuts that came later. And I'm also wondering what fixes which of these challenges or bottlenecks. I mean, some of these I could picture funding to address human resource constraints being helpful with. Not so sure about. I also have some questions. I still am grappling with the decline in referrals and over time, and people, sometimes people say to me, well, after Measure 110 went in place, and small substances of to the drug treatment court went down, to which I have to ask. I mean, it seems like most of the people who've come through drug treatment court had charges greater than possession of small amounts of controlled substances. So I'm not making the connection there between those two things and the kind of slowdown in referrals. So there's a whole bunch of questions I would love to pose to the group and see if there's any thoughts on.
Commissioner, Chief Krantz.
Thank you. A couple things, Commissioner Chang, that you mentioned that I think are worth discussing. I think there's, particularly in the 11 recommendations that were sent forward by a well-connected group of DAs and chiefs and sheriffs and LSC around. One of those key recommendations is the continued funding, especially courts in the statewide, not just particularly certain counties, as an overall solution. And we've talked about this. So I'm on the OACP board. We talked about these recommendations, and the 11 recommendations are really as one body. Any one of those get taken out of these that we push forward through this legislative council committee will really weaken this entire recommendation package. So I think it's important, if we want to see some of these changes or continued prioritization around specialty court, around treatment, around medically assisted treatment, we support the overall idea of the package to our legislative partners and encourage them to really take note with these 11 recommendations, as they're critical and they all interplay. Treatment courts, important. That's one of the things that we saw successes for because it is the coercion that the community has. There was no coercion to stop drug use if you don't have some sort of accountability factor there. We definitely saw a loss of referrals to treatment court because of Measure 110. And it wasn't because there's a drug charge and there's all the other charges. The drug charge is what gets you those other charges frequently. We no longer have the tool, for instance, to get in people's pockets, to get in their cars, where those other charges came from when they had a possession case. So just simply Measure 110 was a demise of treatment court. It just goes hand in hand. There was no longer possession cases. So that was a huge blow to the overall referral process, I believe. And I think DA Gunnels is kind of agreeing there, and Sheriff Nelson, from us who see it on that street level, I think that was a big impact. But if we really support the idea that we need to, I'll use the word force, not meaningly force, but we need to coerce people into treatment. This is the only system we have to do that as a criminal justice system. There is nothing else in the United States because of our Constitution, right? So this really is a package in one big piece. And if we really want to look at all these other things, I think we need to look at the whole, and I don't know if you've all read it or not, but you might want to read through that, and it could give you some good ideas about where do we support the overall idea around changing legislative changes to fix some of these real problems that ballot measure 110 created.
And Chief, this is Shane. Just a little bit on the heels of that, I can tell you, it's my firm belief you can cross participation off as a worry if the legislature is successful in adjusting what Measure 110 has created.
Yeah, Commissioner, this is Wells Ashby. From my perspective, this was a program that ended up having to chase a constantly shifting political landscape, and by that I mean a shifting population. I had a case in front of me where somebody was on their third downward departure, which means this was the third time the legislation mandated and dictated that they should go to prison, and they were going to drug court. So, and I was shocked by that. I had to go talk to Judge Crutchley because when I was a prosecutor, it was, people who had gotten addicted to, opioids, simple possession, people who were forging prescriptions. And, it's what is the incentive to participate? And some people are really looking, if you look at our VIS program for veterans, there's a much easier path through their criminal case than going through VIS. And that is a choice I need to turn my life around, regardless of what it takes to do that. Not everybody thinks that way. Some people just say, what is my easiest path through this criminal event? And, I'll see that sometimes in domestic violence court. Well, I'd rather take my misdemeanor conviction and keep living my life the way I'm living it, as opposed to going through batter's intervention program, dealing with the judge, having review hearings, things of that nature. But I would point out that enrollment was declining prior to Measure 110. Measure 110 certainly didn't help. I've said this before, Measure 110 assumes a rational actor. So if Chief Krantz's folks go out and hand somebody, a business card, and it's suddenly this epiphany like, oh, treatment, tell me about this thing you call treatment. I've never heard of such a thing. And I've always wanted to, live out in the open, exposed to the elements. And it's preposterous. Nobody, wakes up, as a young person and says, boy, I can't wait to be a houseless drug addict, on the verge of death. But you can't access somebody who's in the throes of use. It's a disorder. And exactly as Chief Krantz said, we have this Constitution. And so we can't just say, I'm going to throw you into forced sobriety for your own good. You look at mental health, you have to be so extremely mentally ill to be committed to the state hospital, and that's all constitutionally driven. So I think one of the questions, Commissioner, is, do we want to have this conversation, today with this group, or do we want to, set up, kind of something, that includes this group or invites folks from this group to participate in a broader, maybe not a summit, but discussion about, this topic, since I think, Ms. Curtis and, Dee have really provided a nice outline for that. And I would really look to you for what you would like to see.
I haven't had a message that says my connection was unstable for a few minutes, so I'm trying to get back on. I think that's a great idea. I would love to participate. I would love to help convene that. And I agree. Even if we took the whole 50 minutes that's left in this meeting, there's a lot to unpack in that white paper. So I would welcome it if others think that it's worthwhile. I would welcome engaging in that kind of conversation and having that kind of working group over maybe multiple sessions.
I would certainly participate in that. And, in the interest of full disclosure, I am not an advocate for restoring adult treatment court in the way it was within the courthouse. And I'd be happy to share my thoughts, about that at a group, but I'm certainly not going to, I just came back. I was at a trauma-informed training down in South Denver, and they're talking about community courts. I spoke to some folks from Austin and Boulder, Colorado, and different models. The need for treatment it can't be questioned, and the carnage of addiction and overdose deaths. One is too many, and we have a lot more than one. So I don't want anybody to get me wrong there. It was just incredibly resource intensive in this building. And, as a court, when we're doing one thing, we're not doing another thing. And those can be very difficult choices in terms of, who gets a judicial resource, but would be happy to be a part of that conversation and work with you, Commissioner, and other folks, Steve Gunnels, who's been there since, day one, and, City Council, Councilman Broadman, anybody, I think, who wanted to participate. The more views, the better, because we all live in community. This is where we live. This is where we have our families and our friends, and we're proud. I've always been proud to be an Oregonian, a Central Oregonian, and want people who come up after me to experience the same great place I've enjoyed for a couple decades. So yeah, if you want a quarterback, at least, Commissioner, in terms of your thinking, what that meeting might look like, I'm phone lines open, text, email, anything. I'll happy to be a part of that, and I'm sure others would as well.
Yeah, if I could just make a suggestion, Your Honor.
Yeah.
I'm happy to help. I would also just, I know everybody is completely at their limit in terms of bandwidth. I do feel like, to the extent there is a conversation that this group or something that grows out of this group wants to have about specialty courts, that we need to strike while the iron is hot in order to, make sure we have the input from the sheriff and Chief Krantz and public health and the court in the legislature hearing that. I mean, I know they're going to hear from all of you. But I would hate to waste this opportunity that, we've seen this treatment court go away. I feel like it's very likely that we are going to fix the current situation, or at least there's going to be something out of the legislature to fix Measure 110 or do something. And I would love for the best possible model that will work for Central Oregon to be part of that conversation, rather than getting another framework foisted on us that, is either too resource intensive for the court to actually do, doesn't solve the problem that we're hearing from law enforcement, and is just another, sort of function of legislation in Salem. So I don't know, Commissioner Chang, if it's possible to get together soon and work on that with anybody who wants, I would be an advocate for that.
Your Honor, and this is Shane, and I kind of want to make a point, because Trevor brought up very good points, and I think it's great the commissioner is very interested, but I would like teammates and Trevor and Devi to kind of spearhead it from my point of view, because they've done the research. They were very familiar with treatment court, and kind of help guide us as LIPSC members as we move forward. And maybe a place to start is just consensus from the group that we support the treatment court concept, regardless of how it's going to look in a few months, just to get the momentum started.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. Devi and Trevor seem to know a few things about this ecosystem. So, but I don't want to volunteer them. I'm certainly not their boss.
I apologize, Devi and Trevor.
Yeah, that was all the sheriff. Shane Nelson is his name. North Bend. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I think conceptually, whatever it takes to, achieve some, sobriety, I think that's critical. And, Trevor and Devi, maybe you can think that over, because your, capacity, but you certainly know the space, the abilities and limitations of supervised probation, JRP. You have experience with certainly with the adult treatment court. So maybe we can just, yeah.
Sorry, it's Shane again. One more point to make. I don't want to lose what you said about a community court or the different model, but I think we could even jump ahead to researching that type of a model, because really what it comes down to me is resource bandwidth within the different agencies who are going to participate and the cost.
So in terms of next steps, how do we want to move forward?
I clicked on mute again. From my perspective, I think you've got a lot of momentum going right now at the end of this meeting. At least I feel it. And I think it would be great if Trevor can, with Devi's and Nick's permission, but if maybe he could view some of those community models from the standpoint of, okay, what resources do we need to be effective and still fit what we were talking about, the fidelity of the program, and then put some numbers to it, just so we can all get an idea of what that investment looks like. And then we can kind of brainstorm forward to see how we can accumulate that investment.
Commissioner, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I would support if Trevor and Devi are, have the bandwidth to take this on. I would support staff leadership on this. And I actually like the direction that the sheriff is suggesting, that we check out some of these alternative models that may work better for the circuit court, for our circuit court that, has carried the burden of coordinating the drug treatment court in the past, and, has some ideas about what might be a better model in the future. And also, I guess, as Councilor Rodman mentioned, the urgency of coming up with a package of recommendations or asks fairly quickly, so that we can bring those to the legislature.
I think that's important, because otherwise they're going to come up with something regarding 110, and there's a lot of conversation about treatment courts. So it's unlikely that a head in the sand approach will be effective, although I've tried it many times and been there. Eric, something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Devi, I wanted to check a little bit on their workload. I know that both Trevor and Devi have been working on trying to get a house for people on supervision, and they have a lot of other projects. So I wanted to check in a little bit there, and also give Devi an opportunity to talk about kind of the role role, the role of community justice, and if this fits within their mission, or if it's a little bit outside of it. And if it is outside of it, it's not to say that they shouldn't or couldn't do research on it, but I think it's an important topic, so I just wanted to give DB a chance.
Thanks, Eric. You know, it's difficult. I think sometimes our desire to do things does not match the capacity. So in full disclosure, the idea of putting something on Trevor is not possible right now. I've actually taken things off his plate in order to get this housing project any chance of being successful over the next 64 days. He actually and I calendar it today. We have 64 days up to January 10th, 2024 from the governor's emergency order program for housing to get this to make or break for that housing project. So in the next 64 days, we are quite busy here. I will obviously work with him, and I will work with the people that I report to, which is Nick and Eric, to see where and how we might fit this. And then I guess the other thing is, you know, parole and probation has a huge part to play. We had a huge part to play in adult treatment court. Not only do we provide one full-time FTE PO to that project as it was, and we are currently holding 5 FTE vacant due to our own budget situation. So, you know, we can't go back to what it was at this point in time at all without some huge influx of money. It's just off the table for us. It would have to be something different. So I'm certainly encouraged to think of ourselves with a creative mindset of this. But we do have a huge part to play. And part of our presentation earlier today, and Tanner, help me if I'm wrong, I think we supervise, I think right now, 240 people who have substance use disorders and are in treatment. Treatment court was providing 17 people services. So when we think about when we do one thing for one group and we're not doing something for other, we do have a huge set of people on supervision who do not meet the criteria as was designed treatment court, for whom we are still trying to improve and you know, provide good services for. And Tanner, I'll just stop you. We're going to say something more about our focus on supervision. Is that right?
Yeah, essentially we do have 242 people in treatment right now just for substance abuse. And so the elements that we're struggling to provide is that good quality case management, which we're doing and delving into with a large population. We're supervising 980 individuals right now. So with the shortage in FTE and such, that would be a struggle at this point in time. But we do provide a lot of drug and alcohol treatment services and case management. And our goal is always to be that best quality level of supervision that's out there. So,
Your Honor, this is Shane. I'll start by apologizing to DV and Trevor. Here's what I'll say. I don't normally like public safety to take the lead on something like this, especially our jail, but if we can't find anybody to help move this forward, we have a vested interest in keeping folks out of our facility for all the reasons that you all can imagine. I can have one of my partners take the lead. You just let me know. I just don't want to lose any momentum. And so I will offer that up. I'm sure Captain Michael Schultz would be happy to help pull this forward.
Shane, I appreciate that, and I'm going to. I would certainly be happy to be a part of that conversation and you know, pull some ideas and information together. I just don't want to commit to something I can't follow through on. So why don't and what I am going to do without apologies is I'm going to speak with Mr. Gunnels about this because he's been there from the start, and I read recently that he has a robust staff, and so I'm confident that Mr. Gunnels would be happy to contribute some resource towards this important community endeavor. Mr. Gunnels, I feel like I would just say that so you could stay silent today, and I'll act as your agent.
Well, I appreciate that, Judge, but I am happy to participate in the discussion and in any reconfigured court or other program that we put together if that's our role or anticipated role.
Right. Well, why don't we do that? And And then Commissioner Chang, I'll loop you in as well, and then we can figure out what the next steps are. And I agree that, time is of the essence with a short session coming up. And we can hopefully try to figure out some ways for people to participate in an asynchronous format, so we don't have to have everyone at the same time, but can just reach out for thoughts and comments. And as we move forward, say, hey, here's what we're looking for now, feedback on this. So it's a very light touch, the lightest touch possible to accomplish what we're trying to do here. Does that sound like a go forward plan?
Yeah, Judge, this is Nick. I think it's a great plan. And Sheriff Nelson, I really appreciate it if maybe Captain Schultz can maybe be the convener. Certainly not necessarily the complete doer, because I think there's going to be a lot that several folks are going to contribute to the conversation. I mean, the judge just learned about more options, and our district attorney's office has expertise. Certainly, community justice has a lot to contribute. So the key is if we just have a convener to get to organize and get started here in very short order, I think that'll be a great way to move forward immediately after today.
Well, thank you, sir. If you're all in consensus with that, I can have him help convene.
I'm on board. It's hard to say who says no to Mike. He's just a great guy. And so the worst thing that can happen is he asks you to do something because you're in. It's there is no with him. He's a great person. So that sounds good. Anything else on this topic today?
If I could just say, I mean, so DV and Tanner just identified, the fraction of the people who are engaged with adult parole and probation who were, eligible for adult treatment court in the past. And I think broader than a discussion of how do we bring adult treatment court back, the big question is, how do we provide the accountability, incentives, supports, wraparound services, case management to help people be successful in moving past addiction? And so, I would encourage us as we look at this, as we take this on, to, see our charge a little bit more broadly than, how do we recreate the adult treatment court, but more to, how do we make it possible for more people to have the right mix of supports, accountability, et cetera, in order to be successful with moving past addiction. And super excited about, whatever innovative and creative ideas come out of our community, because that's who we are. We are collaborative, creative, innovative people who figure out good solutions to things. So thank you to all of you for participating in this effort.
Well said, Commissioner. Thank you. That's I'm on board with all of that. Anything else on item 5? All right, excellent. Let's see. Why don't we move to 6 and back to Trevor.
Thank you, Judge. So this is a request. We're getting near the end of a grant cycle. And so I believe we've seen these requests before, but how these grants generally work is you estimate the costs up front and you put those into the categories that they give you. And then you hope that it comes close to that. We're getting to that point where we're right at that. We're able to estimate kind of where we're going to end up. And so based on those estimates, we need to move some funding around in terms of the original JRI grant, which was that 21-23 grant cycle. It's $43,853.04. We need to be able to move that from contractual services into personnel services. We have proposed this to the Criminal Justice Commission, but they also like us to have lipstick approval just on this move. There's no changes to FTE. There's no changes to any programmatic things. It's just taking the money and moving it around based on where the funding has ended up being spent. And so I'm just here as a part of that grant process to get lipstick approval to move those final funds. And then that will ensure that we make sure the JRI funds are completely spent out by the end of December, which these are 21-23 funds. And then we'll have an an FYI for everyone, we'll have an update on 23-25 funds. Hopefully by the end of November, the Criminal Justice Commission will be meeting to kind of go over those. But at this time, I'm happy to answer questions about this. If there's no changes, no new FT, nothing, it's just moving funds around in terms of how they're spent. So the total there is $43,853.04. That's moving them from a contractual services line into a personnel line.
The glamour of the grant environment. Thank you, Trevor. Any questions for Trevor? And is there a motion to approve the amendment, the budget amendment?
I so move.
Thank you. That was Donna. And Shane, would you be willing to turn yours to a second? Outstanding. Any objection? All right, budget amendment motion carries.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Trevor. And that brings us to other business for the good of the order. See, the court has one thing that could have a real impact in our community. U.S. District Judge Michael McShane issued an order based upon a class of incarcerated individuals in Washington County, and I'll spare you all the legal minutia, but essentially it's this, that individuals who are held in custody for need to be released if counsel has not been identified them within 7 days. And that federal order will become effective November 16th. And I would expect, the sheriff is obviously the boss of his shop, but I would interpret that based upon liability as, midnight, stroke of midnight on November 16th, that order will become operative, and it will reach back. And so it doesn't start the clock on the 16th. It would say, okay, now see who you have incarcerated without an attorney, and release those individuals at 7 days. So that's going to have a pretty substantial impact on the court for the following reasons. First of all, we have one individual who does not have an attorney. I think we've identified a solution in advance of November 16th for that one individual. But the other issue becomes this, that if this can turn into knowledge within an institution, so if you are able to end your relationship with your attorney and we can't identify another attorney within 7 days, this can be a vehicle for getting out. We want as few people held pretrial as possible who we think can behave safely in the community and return to court. There are absolutely people who need to be held pretrial. And so I think, I spoke with Angie about this before. I spoke with one of our senior judges. What we might do is set up a specific docket, because a person can get to a point through their behavior where they become self-represented by misconduct. And so if people have a legitimate need for a new attorney or a different attorney, we try to honor that request. If this becomes, I don't like this person, I don't like that person, I won't meet with this person. You have a right to an attorney, not an attorney of your choosing. And so, games around this issue will not be tolerated. This Court of Appeals is very specific because the right to an attorney is so important. It's so critical that the Court of Appeals is very specific on what process and colloquy the court needs to have with an individual to make a finding that the person is no longer, that they are now self-represented through misbehavior. And so we're going to look at, what that colloquy will be, how those motions will be addressed, whether or not those will be heard bench-wide, or if they'll live on a specific docket, which would most likely be with me. And so more to follow on that. That federal order does apply statewide. It had initially applied to Washington, and the lawsuit changed, so that's statewide. And so we will, evolve with that and work with, the district attorney and the sheriff. And we, Rebecca Williams is our person who's in charge of identifying attorneys for individuals. We have had some local firms sign up for hourly work. So we've increased some attorney capacity, but we are always right on, the edge with this. But, Becky Williams is just one of the best in the business. And, so we're going to do everything we can to, keep the community safe and respect Judge McShane's order. Any questions about that? Right. Any other business for the good of the order today? All right, it's really good seeing everyone. Really appreciate the discussions today. And again, thank you to Dee and Angie, and I'm sure Trevor for putting together that excellent outline. I hope everyone has a nice evening and a great week. And thank you.